I'm David Spencer. Welcome to Gardening with Bugs. Segment: Never buy ladybugs. I know this sounds like a contentious one. I have nothing against ladybugs. As you know, I'm always an advocate for all the bugs in the garden, and there's all sorts of native ladybugs. But what this is about is the buying of commercially available ladybugs. Now, unlike most commercially reared beneficial insects, ladybugs are collected from the wild. This is strictly prohibited amongst International Organization of Biocontrol Producers, like the reputable companies that you're buying all sorts of other bugs from. We know the detriments to collecting them from the wild, and some of those I'd like to share with you. When you buy ladybugs, you're buying a bucket or a bag of ladybugs that are usually kept quite cold. The reason for this is they are collected from their overwintering site in places like Colorado or a little bit south in the Rocky Mountains. So every year, these ladybugs migrate. You might be familiar with the radar from Los Angeles a few years ago picking up this massive blob, and it was identified as millions of ladybugs making this trip. And since about the 60s, like the ladybug trade has been going on long before that, but about the 60s, environmentalists began to kind of hone in on this and recognize the dangers here. So first of all, we were naturally reducing the population, the native population of these ladybugs. And what we were doing was allowing the introduced ladybugs, Aridaxis in particular, to find its way in there, to start muscling the native ones out of the way and cause some problems. But further to that, their overwintering method is protection by numbers. And so in these massive piles, they're subject to all sorts of parasitism and predation by other things. Now, when they're collected and sent halfway across the continent into your backyard, they are carrying with them those parasites that will infect the native ladybugs to your area. As detrimental as the trade is, it's really also a fool's game. The University of Cornell, University of California, Davis, both marked some of these ladybugs, released them to figure out if they stuck around in your yard. They do not. They have to go back to their overwintering spot almost immediately. Yes, they'll eat. They need some energy in order for the flight, and will stop several places in order to get there. But they are not the ones that show up in your yard. Now, this is an interesting thing about ladybugs and why us in the biocontrol world are never super quick to be anti-ladybug. And that's because we see it as the gateway drug to biocontrol. Like, everybody from when you're a young kid understands that the ladybug is a good bug. If I had the ability and the guts to pick up some ugly looking spider from the garden and put it in my daughter's hand and tell her this was a good bug and it eats bad bugs, I would, but I can't. Instead, I do exactly what everyone else did and put a ladybug on her hand and show her how neat those are. They stand out, they're beautiful. And so if people are keen to get rid of their household sprays or their commercial pesticides, and ladybugs is the way to do it, two things happen. First of all, that allows them to kind of experience the whole world of biocontrol and realize that it's quite simple. But even better is they usually get immediate results. And it's not because of those ladybugs, it's because they stopped spraying to begin with. So as soon as they stopped spraying, the natural ladybugs showed up. Most people don't recognize the difference. In fact, there's still lots of people that believe the number of spots on a ladybug determines the age of it. I'm here to tell you that 2-spotted ladybug is the 2-spotted ladybug. The 7-spotted ladybug is the 7-spotted ladybug. They're individual species. The native ladybugs show up. So do all the other predators. Things that you're not going to notice, like the spiders themselves, which do most of the predation at night. You'll see an aphid population disappear the next day. Things like Aphidius, the naturally occurring parasitoid that parasitizes specific aphids, they'll show up because you've stopped spraying. The insects that are most vulnerable to the homemade concoctions, in particular the flies, like hoverflies and Aphidoletes, they'll show up as well. So just by applying the ladybugs, it allows growers to finally get the control that they need. It's just amazing how punishing the chemical use is, even when it's just stuff from your home cupboard. The other important thing to know about ladybugs, and I guess I should mention that term we usually mean for that family of beetle. There's hundreds of them. There's even ones that are just all black and quite small. There's ones that are not beneficial whatsoever, at least in the terms of a gardener's viewpoint. Basically, all of these ladybugs have similar life cycles, and quite a them are quite long. And when we talk about the ones that are beneficial to the garden, our gardens, it's usually the ones that show up quite late in the year. So forget the ones that you've released and whether or not they stuck around for a second, but think about when you see them. So individually all year in your garden, you'll see the odd one, but it's not usually till the end of like August, September, where you see those boulevard trees dripping with honeydew from aphids, and you look up and you see thousands of ladybugs. It's only at that time when their population really explodes, and there's a reason for that. Those types of predators, the ones that eat a lot, and they are incredible predators, they need that huge population of aphids in order to sustain their diet, as well as the diet of the eggs and the larvae that they've laid. So they naturally want to show up much later in the game. So that right there should prompt you to say, well, maybe I should buy them and get them in a little bit earlier. At least they'll eat a few aphids before they fly off. And that's fine. It's fine to believe that, but it's interesting to note that the number one beneficial insect bought by home gardeners is the ladybug for aphid control, and the number one bought by commercial growers is Aphidoletes aphidimyza. When a commercial grower is going to evaluate whether or not a beneficial insect is going to work for them, they need to look at a few things, one of which is whether or not it's cost effective compared to a regular chemical treatment. So they're very keen to look at how much predation am I getting per dollar, and whether or not that threshold of aphid control is suitable. Like, do they want them all gone? Do they want most of it gone? They have to determine that from a commercial point of view. So their eye is very keen, and they'll hire people like professional scouts in order to do a lot of that work for them. So they do not buy ladybugs for exactly that reason. You need high populations of aphids in your greenhouse or in your yard to maintain those ladybugs. It's better just to let them come in and go and graze as they like to do. Whereas something like Aphidoletes, you release it, they're highly competitive in their natural state. They have a quick life cycle, so they need to eat as much as they can right off the bat, compete with one another for those aphids. So when you get them commercially reared, not collected from the wild, but controlled in a lab, the population is so high that when you release them, you can really knock down the aphid population quite quickly. And we're talking about something that's relatively close in price, a bucket of ladybugs in a tiny little container of lab rear Aphidoletes aphidimyza. So I encourage you this year, if you're someone that buys the ladybugs, it's amazing just the thought of releasing those, especially if you have kids or something like that. I encourage you to release something else like Eupedes americanus, the hoverflies adults, which are also beautiful, and they're pollinators for your garden, and native and migratory anyways, but lab reared. Or if you want the aphid control, try something like Aphidoletes aphidimyza. Drop the habit of buying commercially wild collected ladybugs. That's it for this segment of Gardening with Bugs. Hit like, please subscribe if you enjoy this content, and we'll see you on the next one.